Hello, my name is Samantha Juster, and I'm the Public Engagement Officer at the United States Embassy in Canberra. As a passionate advocate for international education exchange, I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to kick off today's event. My exchange experiences, including on the Fulbright program in Taiwan, were life-changing. Education USA is an integral part of the United States Department of State network. Here in Australia, Education USA delivers a free service to support anyone aspiring to do their undergraduate or postgraduate studies in the United States. Our 3 offices in Sydney, Melbourne, and Perth all have experienced staff who are ready and willing to help you navigate the college process, so please don't hesitate to reach out to ask for assistance. As demonstrated by its phenomenal Olympic showing, Australia is a huge sporting country. It's therefore not surprising that so many Australians are interested in choosing an American college or university to become student athletes. This student athlete experience is also shared by many of this year's Australian Olympic participants. To develop, train, and compete in a sport while also gaining a top-notch degree is an almost uniquely American experience. Today, we are delighted to be joined by Josh Smith, Manager of Eligibility Services and Transfer Team Lead at the National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics, the NAIA. Australia is consistently in the top 10 sending countries to the NAIA, and Josh will let us know how to best navigate the student athlete pathway. We are also thrilled to be joined by Samantha Brackenrigg, a former student at the Ravenswood School for Girls in Sydney. Samantha is now playing tennis as part of the NAIA at Judson University in Illinois. Enjoy the session, ask questions, and now let me hand things over to today's moderator from Education USA Australia, Sarah Zamanzadeh.
Thank you so much, Samantha, and thank you for that introduction. As Samantha mentioned, I'll be the moderator of today's session. So before I hand it over to our presenters, I'm just going to go over a little bit of housekeeping. So the presentation or the session today will follow a presentation and then Q&A format. So there's an option or an opportunity at the end for you to ask all your questions. If you would like to ask a question live during the Q&A, there is a little raise your hand button at the bottom of the screen. You can click on that one and then I'll allow you to unmute yourself to ask your question live. If you prefer, you can type your question into the Q&A section of the chat, the section of the webinar. So again, that's just down the bottom of your screen and has a little Q&A next to it. You can type your question in at any time. I'll monitor the questions in the back end, so any that have been addressed already, I can type in the answer. Otherwise, we'll ask them live at the end. All right, perfect. So now I'm going to hand it over to Josh to kick us off. Thanks, Josh.
Great, thank you. Good morning to all of you in Australia. I just wanted to begin by thanking Sarah and Samantha and Education USA for arranging this opportunity to share with you all about the NAI and college athletics here in the United States. As Sarah and Samantha mentioned, my name is Josh Smith, and I am a manager of eligibility services for transfer students with the NAI Eligibility Center. Today, I'm hoping to provide you with some information about college athletics in the United States, some scholarship information, recruitment details, and the eligibility process for possible student athletes like yourselves. Before we get into all of that, I thought it might be beneficial just to share a little bit of the history of the NAI to give you some context about our organization and how it has continuously been at the forefront of progress in college athletics. The NAI stands for the National Association of Intercollegiate Athletics and is headquartered in Kansas City, Missouri, right in the heart of the United States. This is a picture of our national office with our logo, and behind it, you'll see thousands of photos of our students competing in the sports that they love. And I think it's just really important for you all to know just how student-centered our organization truly is. The NAI was founded in 1937 by Dr. James Naismith, who invented the sport of basketball. And originally, the NAI was a basketball-only college athletics association. To this day, the NAI Basketball Championship continues to be the longest running college basketball tournament in the world, having a longer history than the NCAA men's basketball tournament, which is better known as March Madness here in the United States. The NAI has been at the forefront of social progress and change. It was the first college athletics association in which African American student athletes participated and was the first association to invite historically Black institutions to become members. Additionally, we were the first association to sponsor championships for both men and women. Our association not only has a long history with athletics, but when it comes to social progress and change as well. So here are just a few quick numbers about the NAI that will help give a better picture of the association. The NAI is an association of 250 colleges and universities across the United States, with a few member universities in Canada. Our institutions are in a variety of locations. They're both in rural and urban areas, large cities, and small towns. Our institutions are often smaller colleges of liberal arts and sciences, and probably about half are private and the other half public. Our institution's student body populations averages between 2,000 and 5,000 students, but we actually see this as a benefit, especially for international students. The smaller student body populations help create a greater sense of community, and the small class sizes help make sure students do not get left behind. I think for a lot of our students, they just really get to know their professors, which is awesome. They can go ask them questions, and there's some professors that invite them over to dinner and things like that. And I think that's just something that happens at smaller colleges and universities like our institutions. For our international student athletes, the team aspect is especially beneficial just to build community. It's just a way to really improve student life and for academics ultimately. Around 65,000 student athletes participate in collegiate athletics at their NAI institution, with about 10,000 of these athletes being international students. Australia consistently lands in the top 10 of sending countries, and we continue to see increases in the number of Australian students registering with the NAI Eligibility Center each year. The NAI offers championships in 26 sports. In the fall, we offer cross country, American football, soccer, and women's volleyball. In the winter, we offer basketball, bowling, competitive cheer, competitive dance, indoor track and field, swimming and diving, and wrestling. In the spring, athletes compete in baseball, golf, women's lacrosse, outdoor track and field, softball, tennis, and men's volleyball. We also have 4 invitational or emerging sports, including beach volleyball, men's lacrosse, flag football, and women's wrestling. The top sports Australian student athletes compete in are basketball, tennis, volleyball, and golf. Combined, our 250 member institutions offer up to $800 million in athletic scholarships. Athletic scholarships specifically, can be full scholarships, meaning they cover the cost of tuition, room and board, books, and other fees, or they can be partial scholarships, meaning they just cover certain parts and certain expenses. It is important to note that the NAI as an association does not offer scholarships, but it's the individual member institutions that are the ones offering the scholarships. The NAI itself as an association only governs the athletic scholarship limits. So for example, if you take baseball, the NAI as an association dictates that a school may only offer the equivalent of 12 full scholarships, but it's up to the individual institutions to decide how they want to break that down. So with those 12 full scholarships, they could either offer 12 full scholarships, they could offer 11 full scholarships and 2 half scholarships, or they could only offer even like reduced amount of that, just 8 full scholarships for baseball, and that's it. They kind of just forego the 4 additional full scholarships they have. In addition to athletic scholarships, our institutions offer a number of academic scholarships for good grades. And our institutions are also interested in internationalizing their campuses, meaning that many of our institutions may offer scholarships just for being an international student. And it is possible that by combining academic, international, and athletic scholarships, that the full cost of your time at an NAI university could be completely financially covered. Now we'll move on to talking about the actual eligibility process. And today I'll be addressing a very specific student type, And so if you happen to fall outside of this category of students I'm discussing today, I'll be providing my contact information at the end of this presentation. And I would just encourage you, if this doesn't fit who you are, just you can contact me and we can discuss the specifics of your specific academic situation, and I can get you the information that you need. So today I'll be specifically addressing freshman students who have no university or post-secondary enrollment and have been out of secondary school for 1 year or less. I just also wanted to note that kind of this general overarching eligibility rule is that in the NAIA, your eligibility is limited to 10 semesters or 4 seasons of competition. And these two are kind of separate. So if you enroll in 10 semesters, but you still have seasons of competition left to compete, your eligibility is unfortunately exhausted because you have enrolled in 10 semesters. Likewise, on the flip side of that, if you compete in 4 seasons of competition, but still have some semesters left, you have also exhausted your eligibility with the NAIA. For those of you who may just be starting to consider university, in the United States, 10 semesters is roughly the equivalent to 5 academic years. And it's also important to note that a bachelor's degree in the United States will generally take you 4 years to complete. The eligibility process for international students is a 2-step process. So all first-time NAIA student athletes will need to register with the NAIA Eligibility Center at playnai.org, and they must receive a determination of eligible before they can compete at their NAIA institution. When registering with Play NAIA, you'll be asked to enter some personal information, provide some academic history, and list any athletic events you have competed in following your graduation from secondary school. You may also receive a questionnaire through the Play NAIA system with some additional questions about any gaps that you may have in your academic enrollment or possible athletic events or tournaments you may have competed in. In addition to Play NAIA, international students must also order what's called an Incred Evaluation. Incred is the required method of submitting international academic records to the NAIA. All international students must order an Incred Evaluation. And when signing up for Incred, you'll be asked, kind of similar to Play NAIA, to enter your academic history and then to submit any required academic documentation. Incred's final evaluation of your academic records will be automatically uploaded to your Play NAIA profile once completed. For some additional information, Incred is a credential evaluation company owned and operated by the NAIA. It allows for the electronic submission of your academic records and became required for all international students starting January 2021. This is actually like a really nice change. So for years, we required international students to submit their documents through postal mail. And so there are a lot of students where that process would take a really long time. Obviously, sending postal mail from Australia to Kansas City, Missouri would probably take quite a bit of time. So using Incred, you're able to just electronically upload your academic records. The benefit of Incred is that your evaluation can also be used both for eligibility and then also sent to your NAIA institution for admissions purposes, depending on that institution's policy. So a lot of our member institutions are now kind of just using the same standards that the NAIA does to assess the academics for international students. So an Incred evaluation basically is just looking at the same thing for admissions purposes. So a lot of our member institutions are now requiring their students to get an Incred evaluation to get them through the eligibility process, as well as their own admissions process. So Incred offers 4 types of credential evaluations, but the 2 types required for incoming freshman students who have not been enrolled at a university or post-secondary institution are the high school basic evaluation type and the high school course-by-course evaluation type. So the high school basic evaluation confirms your high school graduation, your graduation date, and will include a GPA conversion. The only additional thing that the course-by-course evaluation does is it goes a bit further and lists out the exact courses you took in high school with the grades you received for each specific course, rather than like an overall GPA conversion. So what exactly are the actual eligibility requirements? So incoming freshmen who have not been enrolled at a university or post-secondary institution are required to meet two of the three following eligibility requirements: a qualifying ACT or SAT test score, a secondary school GPA of a 2.0 or higher on the US 4.0 scale, and or a class rank letter confirming that you graduated in the top half of your graduating class. The NAI Eligibility Center accepts two standardized tests offered within the United States and abroad. A student would have to achieve a minimum of an 18 on the ACT or a minimum of 970 on the SAT. Test scores must be sent to the NAI Eligibility Center directly from the testing center, so directly from the ACT or SAT, and the test must be taken before the start of the semester you intend to begin competing in athletics at your NAI institution. The second requirement is to have a 2.0 GPA on the US 4.0 scale. For international students, this will require submitting your academic records to Incred for an evaluation. Incred will verify if you meet this requirement by using the NAI Academic Published Standards, which goes in depth over how we convert the GPA. And I'll talk about that in a little bit here in a second. Lastly, a class rank letter showing you graduated in the top half of your graduating class may be required. So while we understand this is largely a US-centric concept, class ranking simply means showing where you are ranked among your classmates based on grades. So for example, if you were in a class of 50 students, the student with the best grades would be ranked 1 or first, while the student with the worst grades would be ranked 50th or last. Please keep in mind an incoming freshman would have to meet 2 of these 3 requirements. So it could really be any combination of these 3. So you can meet both the GPA and test score requirement, you can meet both the GPA and class rank requirement, or you can meet the test score and the class rank requirement. So what exactly are the required documents for Australian students? As I mentioned, the NAI publishes on its site an academic standard for most countries we receive students from. And so it's called the NAI Academic Published Standard. And that the standard goes over exactly which credentials we consider comparable to a US high school diploma to meet our high school graduation requirement. And then it also provides further details on how we would convert grades from those credentials to a US 4.0 scale. I just took like a quick little snip of one of those documents or a section of the Australian academic standard. And so you'll see there's like a group A, which tells you which documents we would accept to meet the high school graduation requirement. And then there's a group B, which tells you which documents we do not accept. And then if you also look down kind of at the bottom of that page, there's that grading scale in a GPA calculation section. So it tells you what grades we convert to what in the US system, and then how we would actually convert that into onto the 4.0 GPA scale. For Australia, I've provided a list here of the required documents by state and territory. So just for the Australian Capital Territory, we require that Year 12 certificate, New South Wales, the higher school certificate, the Northern Territory, the NTCE, Queensland, the senior certificate, or the certificate of education. For South Australia, we require the certificate of education, Tasmania, certificate of education as well, Victoria, certificate of education, and then Western Australia, the certificate of education as it pertains to that particular state or territory. The NAI also has essentially a built-in gap year that we call the post-secondary amateur year, or PSAY. And so this is basically a period that starts on the day of your secondary school graduation and then lasts until the first day of the 13th month following secondary school graduation. So it's essentially a year-long gap. During this year, a student is allowed to compete in non-intercollegiate competition without being charged a season of competition. So you can participate in, if you're a basketball student, for example, a basketball league, a basketball tournament, things like that. And we won't have to kind of like assess the level of competitiveness of that competition. If you do compete outside this gap year, it is possible your competition is considered comparable to a collegiate season. And so you may end up losing one of those 4 seasons of competition if we, using our criteria, determine it to be similar to a collegiate season. And then you may have to meet additional requirements. So not only would you potentially lose a season of competition, but there may be additional eligibility requirements that I'm not going to go over necessarily here, but there may be additional requirements that you have to meet. Okay, so I thought it would be best just to go over some frequently asked questions regarding eligibility. And so one of the main ones we get asked a lot is, how early should I register for Play NAI, and how early should I register for Incred? So for international students, we don't issue eligibility determinations until you have completed or graduated from secondary school. So this is different from US students, where we're able to sometimes give them early eligibility determinations based on what year they are in high school. Unfortunately, we don't do that for international students. So you will have to complete secondary school or graduate from secondary school before we can give you an eligibility determination. In spite of that, we would definitely encourage you to register for Play NAI and Incred as soon as possible to get that process started. So you'll still be able to fill out a lot of information on the Play NAI system. You'll even be able to submit a lot of your academic records to Incred. So even though you might not have this final transcripts or that final certificate, they'll still be able to do some assessment and even like provide you with a GPA calculation before your final certificate is issued, so you know kind of where you are with the eligibility requirements. The other thing, like with registering early with that, is it really helps with getting scholarships and with recruitment as well. Our coaches are looking for students who are already engaged in the process, so that it's not kind of like this last minute thing for you. So if you have registered with Play NAI and they can see you on that system, and if they know that you've already started engaging with the Incred process, it really does help build kind of rapport with a coach at an NAI institution, because they know that you're already engaged and working towards getting eligible. So the next thing I'm going to address is just, how do you even find an NAI school? So on our national office's website, we do have a map that's kind of like this interactive map that allows you to filter the schools by the location, sports offered, the religious affiliation, enrollment size. So depending on what's the most important factor to you, that map I would really point you to. If you are interested in an institution that has smaller class sizes, definitely use that map to kind of find that range that you want to be in. If there are very specific sports that you're interested in competing in, definitely use that as well, and you can kind of narrow down that search. The other thing that I would encourage you is, once you find an institution that you're interested in, is just using Google to find out more information about the institution, the town or city that it's in, the state even that it's in, and just getting that information to kind of help you kind of narrow down or like reduce that list to just a few institutions. The last thing I'm going to just touch on here is just, how do you get recruited? And so kind of similar to the situation with scholarships, the national office, the NAI as an association, does not recruit international students, but it's actually our individual member institutions that are the ones doing the recruiting as well. So what I would recommend is kind of going back to looking for schools that you're interested in, is finding kind of like a list of maybe 5 to 10 schools that you are interested in, and reaching out to the coaches of those institutions, letting them know who you are, what you play, why you think you would be good for their team. And so within the NAI, like, you're free to directly engage with the coaches of the different institutions, which might not necessarily be the case with different associations such as the NCAA, but it's free, it's on you. It's like within your power and ability to directly reach out to coaching staff. The other thing you can do is you can definitely use websites like Huddle or YouTube to just upload videos showing kind of like your skills, running drills, things like that. And then you can also use reputable recruiting companies that will help you like walk through the entire process. What's nice is like the NAI is pretty user friendly as far as using Incred, the Play NAI, your freedom and ability to directly message institutions and coaches, where you shouldn't necessarily have to use a recruiter, but if that's something that you can afford and makes it easier for you, definitely do that. They can walk you through almost the entire process and help you get connected to people and get the information that we would need as the Eligibility Center or as Incred to us. And then I also just included a link. There is a guide on our website as well, specifically for international student athletes. It'll go over a lot of the information that I'm touching on here. But also, as I mentioned, since I'm addressing a very specific student type in this presentation, that guide will go a little bit more in depth on different student types. So if you're not a freshman student, if you're not graduating this November or December, you've already been maybe like in a university, then that's definitely a resource that you can use. Again, definitely you can contact me as well. But there will be some additional information in that guide for you as well. And then I thought I would just provide you all with just a couple of contacts. So this is my contact information, my direct email, and then my phone number. This is also our customer relations line. So there's a specific line for international students. So if you need to use that, that's a helpful way to get some information pretty quickly. And then also if you just need to contact Incred about how to sign up, what documents do you need, just like statuses on that Incred process, that Incred information is there as well. So again, just thank you for your time and your interest in college athletics in the United States. For me, like the Ncaa, I think is just a fantastic organization, particularly for international students, because it is a little bit easier to like navigate the process. It's smaller, and so you're more likely to get playing time. You're more likely to participate in our national championships. And then ultimately, like this is really truly about academics. And so with our small campus sizes, you'll be better connected to professors, you'll be better connected to the university itself. And that definitely helps a lot of students succeed. And so I would just encourage you in that, just consider that. And there's plenty of resources to help you kind of navigate and find institutions that are best suited for you in that. So I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Sarah, who I think will introduce our next speaker.
Great, thank you so much, Josh, and such an informative presentation. I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions. Before we do, we're going to go over to Samantha Brackenrigg, who is a student athlete playing tennis at Judson University. She's from Sydney, Australia. So Samantha, if you'd like to tell everyone a little bit about your experience playing with the NAIA.
So, as everyone's been saying, I go to Judson University in Elgin, Illinois, which is around 45 minutes from Chicago. It's in a really small town. And as Josh was saying, the schools for Ncaa are really small. So it is quite a small school. I think we have around 1,000 to 2,000 students on campus. So it's really a nice environment because I get to know a lot of people on campus, and I walk around, I see familiar faces everywhere. I'm currently a second semester sophomore, and I'm studying sports management with a minor in marketing. And I've thoroughly enjoyed my first year and a half here at Judson. It was a really easy transition for me into college due to high discipline education in Sydney. And a lot of other internationals here have said that the education system here is really easy to slot into and adjust to. And as for the social aspect, it can come as a challenge for some people, but everyone here loves Australians, so I felt very welcome. Everyone's fascinated that I have a cool accent and I'm from a different country. My school has around 30 other international students, with 4 of us being from Australia, and we're also all on the tennis team together, the 4 of us. The tennis team is like a second family, which I love that. And we're all so close and we have good times together, but we can also fight as sisters sometimes. So it's basically having a family. Although sometimes it gets hard being on the other side of the world, away from your family. It's an amazing once in a lifetime experience. And I've grown a lot as a person whilst being here. When I was at home, I was heavily dependent on the support of my family, coaches, and friends. Since being here, I've been able to grow independently, and I'm able to make bigger decisions by myself rather than relying on other people's inputs. Also, one of the other big things is I have to do my own washing and clean my own room by myself, which shouldn't be an issue, but it's definitely a change not having your mum there all the time, or your dad. During my process of applying to college in America, I had many different conversations with the agency I used about which organization I should go to, considering there's 3 different organizations in American college. So NCAA, which has, your Div 1, Div 2, Div 3, and then NAIA, and then junior college. I was unable to attend NCAA as I missed 1 academic credit, but my agency suggested that I should go to junior college, and then after 2 years, I would transfer to an NCAA school. I was extremely concerned about transferring after 2 years and having to go through the whole recruitment process again. So my agency then suggested that NAIA would be the best fit, considering it's a 4-year program and I would also be able to play high-level tennis whilst getting my degree. The top NAIA schools in the country for tennis are the same level as the Ncaa Division One athletes. The program and conference that I currently play in is relevant to Division Two for tennis. And my first semester here, I was lucky enough to be able to play in both singles and doubles lineup. And I was awarded the National Christian College Athletic Association Athlete of the Week, as well as NAIA Rookie of the Year in the East region of America for tennis. Continuing on to this semester, I was awarded tennis captain of my team, as well as being involved in the student leadership team at Judson, as well as being on the athletic board for my college. There are so many different types of opportunities of leadership that college can provide to prepare you for your future endeavors. Tennis at Judson is a fall and spring sport, so I'm lucky enough to be able to compete all year round. Even though some other sports only compete in one semester, they still train and run scrimmages to prepare them for their season. We train around 4 times a week on court, but then we also have additional workout routines off court every day. The balance between sport and academics is usually based off your own work ethic, as well as what major you're in. Typically majors such as like architecture, pre-med and nursing, they have a larger workload compared to someone like me in sports management. But yeah, it's really up to you with the balance. Like, because if you're not very good at doing your assignments on time and then we go away for a tournament, then you might get behind in your work. But every coach and professor and student at Judson or any type of NAIA college will tell you that your academic is more important than your sport. Although you are traveling across the world to play a sport, you're still here to get your degree for your future. There have been many times when my teammates, including myself, have had to leave training early to attend class. And at the moment, we've missed a lot of class due to having away matches and tournaments. And the requirement here is that you connect with your own professor to ensure that you don't miss any work. So it's all on you, your academics, really. Like, obviously your coach and the professors communicate with you about your academics, but if you're not keeping up with it, it's all on you, really. And usually the beginning of the semester is when we play our most matches. And then over the semester, they become more spread out as we get closer to our exams and our finals. Being in the NAIA organization has provided me with a lot of opportunities and experience that I will forever be grateful for. It's an amazing experience, and I highly recommend it to anyone who wishes to pursue their sport beyond high school whilst getting your degree. So thank you everyone for listening to my experience as a student athlete currently.
Thank you so much, Samantha. And I loved hearing about the kind of coming of age or growing as part of being in the US. Little things like doing your laundry. It doesn't sound hard, but it really is when you kind of forget and you've got no clean clothes. So you really do grow at a US university. And similar to what you mentioned, many Australian students don't meet the strict NCAA requirements because our year 11 and 12 here is very flexible with subject selection. And the NAIA is a great option because although they have requirements, it's not as stringent. So thank you so much for talking about that. So now we'll go into some Q&A. So we have some questions that have been written in. We also have a couple that have been pre-submitted. If anyone is willing or brave enough to ask a question live, feel free to hit the little raise your hand icon. So I'll be able to see that and then I'll be able to allow you to unmute yourself. But if not, we'll just start with the questions that were submitted. Okay, so one question that we actually had pre-submitted, Josh, and you addressed it slightly, has to do with the academic requirements for eligibility. It's in regards to the SAT or ACT, so has that been waived as a requirement during the COVID kind of era? Because we've had testing centres closed and it's not as common for Australian schools to provide a class rank. So some of the students just get a little worried about that.
Yeah, so as it pertains to COVID, the test score requirement was waived in the last academic year, and then it was actually waived for this year. As of right now, it has not been waived for the coming academic year, so 2022 to 2023. It has not been waived for that academic year as of yet. And so I'm not sure when we will know that information, honestly. It's kind of, as a lot of things with COVID is just kind of taking it as it comes. But yeah, if you are applying for 2021, 2022, that requirement has been waived. And I'll just talk a little bit about that exception then. So because that's waived, the only requirement that you need to meet this year was just the GPA requirement. So a 2.0 or above on the 4.0 US scale. And it kind of comes with this additional caveat. So after your first academic year, you would also need to have a 2.0 post-secondary GPA. So while we do waive the test score, it does create an additional requirement kind of in the following academic year, just to ensure that you are making academic progress, essentially.
Great, fabulous. Thank you so much. And I might just quickly, before we change subjects, jump over to you, Samantha. How did you find it as an Australian student trying to submit all these documents or your SAT and your thing into Play Ncaa? Was it easy, hard? Just any tips you might have for Australian students?
So it was hard to get all my SATs done and everything, considering I was in the middle of my HSC, and especially like talking to coaches and everything, it's extremely stressful. I remember I did 2 SAT exams, and then I submit my best one straight to NAIA. But I remember I had an issue with my GPA, that my GPA didn't actually translate out to what it should have. Like, I'm pretty sure I came to Judson with a 2.1 GPA, which is very low. I like just barely made it, and they put me straight into an academic success seminar to try and understand why my GPA was so low. And I was sitting there and I was so confused what was going on. But as soon as I got here, I was able to get my GPA all the way up to a 3.7 after the first semester. So I feel like there's one thing like to tell all the people in here is that like the GPA that you enter with is not going to be the GPA you come out with after your first semester here. But I can't distinctly remember submitting everything into Play Ncaa, which I'm sure I did. I must have to be here. But I assume it must have been really easy if I can't remember. I feel like if it was difficult, I wouldn't remember what to do. I mean, I wouldn't remember, but yeah.
Well, that's definitely positive feedback. If you can't remember, it definitely wouldn't have been too challenging. And I really like the comment on the academic support at the university, and that's very common with all range of US universities and colleges. They have strong support systems to help student athletes and students in general, but definitely student athletes to improve and progress. Okay, so now I'm just going to go through a question that came in through the Q&A. So we have a participant with us online from New Zealand, and Josh, they've asked what were the entry requirements from New Zealand. So I know you went through all the Australian states. I don't know if you know off the top of your head what you accept from New Zealand or...
Yeah, so similar to Australia, we do have an academic standard as well for New Zealand. And the credentials that we accept from New Zealand that we would consider comparable to a US high school diploma is the National Certificate of Educational Achievement at the level 3, and then the same at the level 2. And so we would require that credential as well as the record of achievement, which is kind of like the transcript portion of that. So that's what we would require from New Zealand students. And then they would still have to meet like the other 2 requirements, the test score or the class rank. So kind of the similar situation. It's the same eligibility requirements. That's just this very specific documents required from New Zealand.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Josh. Okay, so I'll read another one that has come in. So it says here, eligibility is based on 4 seasons of competition, but is there a chance that in your first year you train only and not play in the actual games? Therefore, would that year count as one in the 4 seasons?
Yeah, to use kind of similar language to the NCAA, we would consider that a red shirt season. So essentially a season where you're not charged a season of competition, but you're only practicing and training with the team. And the reason why we don't really use the terminology in the NAI of a red shirt, which is what the NCAA calls it, is because we do have that whole, like, if you're not charged a season, you still have the additional seasons to use. Whereas in the NCAA, they use a running clock. So once you graduate high school, you have 5 years to complete your 4 seasons of competition, as opposed to the NAI where we say it doesn't really matter like where you are in your academic career. If you have semesters remaining or seasons of competition remaining, you potentially have eligibility with the NAI. So basically, like, long story short is just that if you're only training and not competing with the team in like a sanctioned competition against another university, then that won't necessarily be considered a season of competition.
Great, fabulous, thank you. Now we've had a few questions come in different formats about whether it is better to contact coaches first or sign up or contact a university first. One student has actually said, so if she's graduating in 2022, there's about an 8-month gap between when we finish here in Australia. So we finish high school in around November, and then obviously September the next year is when the US will start. So is it better for a student to contact a coach in that gap period, or should it be earlier at the beginning of year 12 here?
Yeah, so I would just go back and say the earlier you can start the process, better. So if you're graduating in 2022, I would honestly tell you to start contacting coaches now. Just like a couple things to touch on real quick is, even if you're graduating in November or December, you could start at semester. So you could start at the spring semester. So if, for example, baseball is just like a really easy one because that's like strictly a spring sport. But if you were to play baseball and you're graduating in November or December of 2022, you could pursue eligibility for spring of 2022. You don't necessarily have to wait until fall 2022 to come to your university, your NAI institution. But yeah, so just in general, I would say start contacting coaches as soon as possible. I did see one of the questions was more like, should I register first or should I contact coaches first? To be honest, a lot of coaches will tell you to register with the Play NAI system if you haven't yet. And just to kind of give you some more information and details about that, is when you register with the Play NAI system, you get an Eligibility Center identification number. And you can also be added by institutions to what's called their shortlist. So the shortlist is just the list of students the institution is actively recruiting. And so you can only do this if you have the ECID number. And once you get that, schools can add you to their shortlist, and then they can see your profile. They can see the progress that you've made. So sometimes coaches will just straight up tell you, go and register for the Play NAI system before contacting us. So I would just encourage like registration is probably first before contacting coaches, because they will want to see your ECID number. They'll want to see that you're making progress towards eligibility.
Great, thank you. And so in that sense, because we did get a question kind of about contacting the coach before wasting time applying to the uni, I would always say, yes, contact coaches, but look at the academic requirements of the institution, because if you've got a rough estimate of what your GPA is and the university you're looking at or the coach you're contacting, it's well above the academic standard, it may not be worth contacting that coach, because the coach really obviously needs you to meet the NAIA eligibility, but also it needs you to have academic admission into the uni. So you need to be at that academic level. All right, great. So another question that came in, and I think it's a simple answer, but I'll pass it to you, Josh, because I can't remember from the list. Does the NAIA include rowing?
rowing is not a sponsored sport, and it's not currently on our radar as an invitational or emerging sport either, unfortunately.
Okay, perfect. I thought that was the answer. I just thought double check. And are scholarships awarded for the full year, 4 years, or per year?
That's another institution by institution decision. If there's a coach that is recruiting you, that's something that you would discuss with them. There are some institutions that will guarantee that for the 4 years that you're there. My guess is that most institutions are doing a year by year scholarship, and maybe Samantha might be a good person to ask about that as well.
Samantha, do you have any kind of feedback on your situation?
Yeah, so my scholarship, I sign a scholarship agreement each year. So, but my coaches told me that I'm guaranteed 4 years, but I still have to sign off every single year, like with the money and everything of what my agreement is.
Great, yeah, and that's also what I would recommend students do. If you are only offered a scholarship per year, if an institution only says this is available for the first year, ask about what the plan is for the next 3 years, because obviously you're going to need funding in place. If you're looking for scholarship or funding, you may need that for 4 years, not just one. So just make sure there is a viable plan there for you, and if there's not, talk about, negotiate and see what you can get.
And can I add just real quick? Yeah. So as I mentioned in the presentation, there are other scholarships as well available to you, and they're not just necessarily athletic. Obviously, we're talking about the athletic side of things, but that might be something worth looking into as you're looking for institutions that you're interested in. Do they offer scholarships for international students? What other scholarships am I eligible for at that institution? So there's a lot of factors to consider as you're considering and narrowing that list down of institutions that you want to potentially attend and compete for.
Great, yes, and a good reminder, there's always a lot of scholarships, and we always encourage Australian students to, if they can, stack scholarships. So if you get a sports scholarship, then there might be some sort of admission scholarship as well. Samantha, if you don't mind just sharing, did you stack scholarships, or did you just get a sports scholarship for your participation?
So at Judson, I'm not allowed to, I couldn't pick up an academic scholarship until I'd already completed a semester. So I think now I'm also on an academic scholarship as well, athletic scholarship, but there's like certain requirements, like certain GPAs and things like that to be able to get the academic scholarships. But I have a lot of friends here who are on various different types of scholarships as well as just athletics and academics, but I'm not aware of what they're called, but there are different ones too. Yeah.
Great, fabulous. Another good tip for students, look at all they have to offer. Once you know which uni you want to go at, look at the whole financial aid page, scholarship section. There could be ones you've never even thought of before. Okay, so we've got a question coming about the SAT saying, when is the latest we could sit it? So we always recommend students take the SAT in the end of year 11 or beginning of year 12. And that's more so you're not stressed at the end of year 12 when you're doing your HSC or end of school exams, like Samantha said she was. But for NAIA purposes, when would be the latest they could sit it, Josh?
The latest is kind of like an interesting question, but basically we can't use a test score that was taken after the term has started in the semester that you're competing in. So if we think about, we'll just use soccer. So soccer is a fall sport. If a school's term started September 1st and you sat your SAT September 2nd, we wouldn't be able to use that test score for the fall of whatever year that is. So you would have to take the SAT or ACT before September 1st, before the school term starts.
Okay. Fabulous. Thank you. So it does give students a bit of time. I still highly recommend you do it earlier, just so it's not stressful at the last minute. So we've got another question coming about if they're planning to complete the IB, so the International Baccalaureate, instead of the local schooling, so HSC here in New South Wales, or it changes per state. Will this still meet the entry requirements for NAIA?
Yes, I can pull that up as well. We do accept the IB, the International Baccalaureate, I think there's a certain like score maybe that you have to get. You have to present the International Baccalaureate diploma, accompanying certificate, and yearly grade reports from secondary school. So yes, we do accept that. The only thing I would say about that is if you complete the IB, well, just to back up a little bit, when you register for both Incred and Play Ncaa, it'll ask you what school you attended, what secondary school you attended, and where that school is located. And based off that, it'll tell you which records you need to submit. So if you are completing the International Baccalaureate in New South Wales, it's going to ask you for the New South Wales credentials. So you'll just have to let us know kind of early on that you actually completed the International Baccalaureate rather than whatever credential that you would typically earn in your state or territory. And that way we can kind of adjust your profile as needed with the correct documentation that you need to submit. Because like I said, if you say that you're from New South Wales, for example, it's going to ask you for the New South Wales credentials rather than like the International Baccalaureate. So there isn't really a way for us to know if you completed the International Baccalaureate or if that's what you're working toward, unless you actively tell us that, unfortunately.
Okay, fabulous. That's very good to know, because a lot of students do choose to do the IB here. And Samantha, so a question has come in for yourself. Do you have any tips or advice on how to prepare for an SAT?
So I actually purchased the College Board SAT prep textbook. Yeah, but I was lucky enough, I took 2-unit maths, so like the advanced maths at school. So a lot of the questions, the math questions in the SAT were related to the maths I was taking in school. So I know there was a lot of my friends who took general maths in high school, and they struggled a little bit because they didn't have like the algebra level that was in the SAT. So I highly recommend getting that practice textbook, because I not only go through every single answer and explain it, they have all the practice tests and you can test yourself and everything. I also used Khan Academy, and I know that they went through basically every single topic that would be in the SATs. So yeah, that's basically all I did.
Great, thank you. And yeah, Khan Academy is a great one also, that's kind of easy and free because it's online and it has practice tests on there. So we will often direct students to that one as well. And after this presentation, I'll send out to everyone who registered a list of helpful links, so you can actually follow through on some of the things that have been mentioned. So one question that has come in, which I've left because I didn't quite understand, but maybe Josh understands, I'll read it out. It says, is the 12 scholarships per sport or over all the sports in the college? Do you understand that one?
Yeah,
Okay,
so
cool.
that was actually just a very specific example. So the question is about the scholarship limits per sport. So I had just used the example of baseball. The scholarship limit for baseball is that we only allow institutions to issue up to 12 full scholarships, and that's specific to the sport. So each sport will have a specific limit on the number of scholarships that they can offer, and that's often related to the size of that roster or that team. So for example, American football has like 60 participants on a roster. So they're going to have more scholarships available to them than like a tennis team or like a golf team or something. And I don't have the exact numbers for every single sport in front of me, but if that's something that would be beneficial for you guys, I can definitely get that to Sarah, who can probably pass that on with those resources.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Josh. And we've had one last question come in. It's about how early we need to start the process, but this person is particularly asking because they're graduating in 2023. So that puts them in year 10 now. So, I mean, we at EduSA normally recommend students kind of start in year 11. But Samantha, I'd love to hear about when you started, and then Josh, when do you actually recommend students start? I know you say the earlier the better, but maybe year 7 is a bit too early. So I'll pass it to Samantha first.
So I started thinking about it when I was in year 10, definitely, and started talking to people about what they were going to do. And like, I had a lot of friends who were doing the same thing, and they were talking about taking SAT. So I was getting probably mentally prepared in year 10, talking with my coaches that this is something I want to pursue, because my tennis coach helped me make my video, which I did in mid-year 11. I think I did the video, but I had to end up doing the video 3 times. So because I was not moving my feet fast enough in a few of the earlier videos. So yeah, I think I officially probably started early year 11, and then I took my first SAT end of year 11, and then another one at the beginning of year 12. So yeah, but I know a lot of friends who started a lot earlier than me, like during year 10. But yeah, I think it just depends on like how quick you do stuff.
Yeah. What I think like the best thing that I could say about that is, I had mentioned that, for example, we do issue sometimes like early decisions for US students, and we can issue those up as early as what's considered like the junior year, here in the US. So that's 2 years from graduating high school. And so that's probably like roughly the range that I would suggest starting this process, is like at least 2 years before you're finishing secondary school and earning that final credential. I think there's like a lot of factors that go into it as well, kind of like I think Samantha's alluding to a little bit, but just to be kind of like honest, if you're not particularly a great test taker, for example, and you might need some additional help on the SAT, maybe doing that like early and seeing how you do on your first go around, and if you need to do it again, you've given yourself time to do that by starting the process early. And then it could also be like on the opposite side of it, not just like academics, on your athletic ability. If you are like really good at the sport that you are seeking to compete in, you can probably start that process early and say like, hey, I'm in this particular year, but here's my like video of me doing drills, and these are my skills that I have. And so I'd like to just kind of put myself out there now, just to let you know, like I'm going to graduate in this year. And so you could start that particular process early. So I think it's just kind of a situational basis of balancing kind of like academics. Where are you academically? How much time do you think you need to afford yourself before you graduate to get yourself academically where you need to be? And same thing athletically, like where are you athletically, and where do you think you need to get yourself, and how much time do you need to afford yourself to get recruited, if that makes sense.
Great, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much. We've had a few ones come in quickly, but I can answer some of them. So we've had, what is the main difference between the NCAA and NAIA? And I'd probably really, I mean, I'll just let you obviously comment, Josh, but I'd also let students know that if you look on our Education USA Australia New Zealand YouTube channel, we're going to have full content from the NCAA, the NAIA, and the NJCAA. So students can really listen to each organisation and gain an understanding from themselves. But Josh, if you'd like to comment on that one.
Yeah, I'll actually go back to something that was mentioned at the very beginning of like the Q&A, and that was just kind of like the stricter requirements of, so like one huge difference of the NCAA and the NAIA is that the NCAA requires you to do certain core courses, is what they call them. And there's just like lots of international education systems that don't fulfill those requirements necessarily. And so I think like internationally, there's a little bit more flexibility on like what courses you're taking, because you might have a better sense of direction of where you want to go professionally, so you don't take particular courses. A lot of international systems have more vocational tracks, and vocational tracks really struggle to meet the NCAA's core course requirements. So as opposed to that, like the NAI says, if you just have a 2.0 high school GPA comparable to a US 2.0 GPA, then you meet the same requirements as like a US student. And so that's like one of the biggest differences between the NCAA and the NCAA and the NAIA. The other thing that I would say is, I think a lot of people have like this grand idea of NCAA Division One, like that's what we probably all aspire to. NCAA Division One institutions have 30,000 students in them. they're playing at like the top level of college athletics, and they're recruiting heavily US students primarily. And so one huge advantage of the NAI over NCAA is that they're smaller institutions, which helps academically, but statistically, a majority, like not a majority, but a larger percentage of our students end up competing in the postseason as opposed to the NCAA, because the NCAA is just so much larger. There's way more institutions that are members of that. And so a greater share of our member institutions and our student athletes get to participate in the postseason, which is just, that's kind of what it's about, you know, on the athletic side, is getting to compete for your institution to win that national championship. So if you want an opportunity to compete in the postseason, to have potentially more playing time, to be better seen by your coaches and by your like academic professors and academic staff, then the NAI is probably geared a little bit more to that. And so those are just like some of the differences that I would highlight. Is just NCAA's stricter requirements. NCAA is much larger institutions, and NCAA is like less of an opportunity to compete, not only in the regular season, but in post-secondary or post-season competition.
Great, fabulous. So thanks so much, Josh. And just quickly, one came in saying, is field hockey in the NAIA?
Field hockey is also not in the NAIA,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Great, thank you.